Have you ever had one of those moments so ordinary, so fleeting you didn't even realize your life was about to change? A single dad, a rainy night, and a stranger asking to borrow his phone. That was all it took to begin something no one could have predicted. This isn't just a story about kindness. It's about what happens when you offer it freely, and how the smallest gesture can echo far beyond what you imagined. So, if you're someone who believes in second chances and quiet miracles, and in stories that stay with you long after the last word, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because stories like this, they don't come around often. Now, let me take you to the beginning. It all started with Rain. Single dad, let a stranger use his phone. Days later, he learned she was a billionaire heiress. The rain came without warning. It wasn't the kind that drifted in on clouds with fair notice. It was sudden, aggressive, and cold, the kind of rain that made you believe the sky had finally had enough. Daniel Brooks squinted through the windshield of his beat-up Toyota Corolla as the wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour. He muttered under his breath, his fingers clenching the steering wheel tighter as the clock on the dashboard blinked 12:47 a.m. He had just clocked out of his third consecutive night shift as a mall security guard, an underpaid job he had taken just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge for his son Oliver. His body ached, his eyelids drooped, but he didn't have the luxury of weariness. Not when he had a 7-year-old boy sleeping at home, a fridge that buzzed louder than it cooled, and a landlord who had stopped calling and started knocking. The road was nearly deserted, save for the occasional flicker of headlights from passing trucks. As Daniel approached the old Shell station 2 miles from his house, something caught his eye. A figure. At first he thought it was a trick of the rain, one of those strange illusions headlights played on a tired mind. But as he slowed, he saw her more clearly. A woman stood at the edge of the parking lot, soaked from head to toe, clutching her coat tight around her slender frame. Her hair, long and dark, was plastered to her face. She wasn't holding a phone. No umbrella, no bag, just standing there, like she didn't know where else to go. Daniel's instincts fired in 2 directions. Keep driving, don't get involved. And then the other. What if it was someone's daughter out there? What if it was Oliver's mother? He pulled in. The woman didn't flinch when he rolled down his window. She just turned her head slowly, rain streaming down her cheeks like tears. "Ma'am," he said gently, his voice raspy from the dry heat of the car. "You okay?" She hesitated before stepping closer, arms still wrapped around herself. I need to make a call. My phone died." Her voice was low, almost hoarse. Not desperation, more like exhaustion with a heartbeat. Daniel glanced at the passenger seat where his cracked old phone lay face down. He picked it up and handed it to her without a word. She stared at it for a beat. "Thank you." He nodded. "You can stand under the awning over there. It's drier." She didn't move. Instead, she turned slightly away, pressed the phone to her ear, and dialed. Daniel looked away, trying not to intrude, but the rain wasn't loud enough to drown out the silence that followed. No words, just breathing. Long, fragile breathing. After nearly a minute, she ended the call and handed the phone back. He took it carefully, noting the screen had gone dark. No call had been made. "You didn't talk," he said gently. She looked at him then for the first time, really looked at him, and for a second he thought she might say something meaningful. But she only whispered, "Thank you," and turned away. Daniel watched her walk slowly to the corner of the gas station and disappear into the dark. No car came for her. No rideshare. Just the sound of her footsteps and the steady rhythm of the rain. He could have driven off. Instead, he opened the glove compartment, pulled out the spare umbrella and a half-full bottle of water, and jogged after her. She was huddled under the narrow metal overhang behind the station, shivering. "Here," he said, extending the umbrella and the water. "Not much, but it's something." She looked at them for a long second, then at him. Her eyes, light brown, almost amber, shone not with gratitude, but something deeper, maybe disbelief, maybe grief, maybe both. "You're a good man," she murmured. Daniel shrugged. just a man with an extra umbrella. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. At home, Oliver was curled on the couch, one arm around his stuffed turtle. Daniel kissed his forehead, tucked the blanket tighter around him, and sat down on the worn armchair nearby. He couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the woman's face. The way her lips moved like she was about to speak, but the words got lost somewhere between her throat and her heart. Who was she? Why didn't she say anything? Why did it feel like she had just escaped from something? Or someone? 3 days passed. The memory of her should have faded, but it lingered like the scent of rain in old clothes. Then on the 4th morning, a white envelope arrived at his door. No sender name. Inside, a single note. Sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the biggest turning point. You didn't ask for anything. But someone noticed, and beneath it a neatly typed address. No name, just a time. Saturday, 3:00 p.m., 1604 Autumn Lake Drive. Daniel stared at it, his heart ticking louder than it should have. He didn't know anyone who lived in that part of town. That was the rich side. Gated homes, lakefront lawns, security cameras. He checked the envelope again. No money, no threat. Just a message. A quiet echo from a rainy night. A question lingered in the back of his mind as he folded the paper and looked out the window at the cloudy sky. Who the hell had he just saved? Daniel sat in the front seat of his car parked just outside the massive iron gates of 1604 Autumn Lake Drive, staring at the elegant security panel like it was a puzzle he hadn't been trained to solve. The street was a world away from his modest neighborhood. Here the sidewalks gleamed, lined with manicured hedges and dogwood trees in soft spring bloom. The lake behind the rows of properties glistened under the mid-afternoon sun, as if even the water here was more refined. Oliver sat in the back seat, legs swinging nervously. He clutched his stuffed turtle Toby tighter than usual. Daniel had told him this was just a visit, someone said. Thank you in a strange way he'd explained, which was about as much as he understood himself. He hadn't planned to bring Oliver, but leaving him home didn't feel right. And, truthfully, Daniel didn't want to face whatever this was alone. He leaned out and pressed the call button on the security box. A voice answered instantly, calm, professional, and oddly familiar. Mr. Brooks, you're right on time. Please proceed through. Take the second right after the fountain. The gates opened silently. Daniel exchanged a glance with Oliver in the rearview mirror, then drove forward as if entering another reality. The estate revealed itself like a painting. A sprawling 3-story home in white brick and soft gray stone stood before them, framed by willow trees and trimmed ivy. Everything looked deliberate, perfected, expensive. Daniel pulled into the circular driveway, heart thudding louder with each turn of the tires. A man in a tailored navy suit greeted them at the car. He had the posture of someone who spent more time in boardrooms than outdoors, but his voice was warm when he said, "Welcome, Mr. Brooks. And you must be Oliver." He smiled at the boy. Oliver offered a shy nod and a whisper, "Hi. I'm Mr. Harlan. Ms. Ellington is waiting for you inside." Daniel froze. That name. Ellington. He knew it. Everyone did. It was stamped on the side of half the city's real estate and printed in bronze outside tech offices and luxury towers. Claire Ellington, heiress to Ellington Global. But it couldn't be. Could it? Still silent, he took Oliver's hand and followed the man into the house. The inside was quieter than expected. Not cold, not sterile, but hushed like a museum filled with private grief. Art lined the walls, some famous, some clearly drawn by a child's hand. A fireplace crackled faintly even in the afternoon sun. And there she was, standing at the far end of the grand room by a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the lake. Hair pulled into a loose braid, a soft blue dress draping her frame, and no trace of the rain-drenched woman he had met days before, except in the eyes. Those amber eyes still carrying something heavy. She turned slowly. Her expression changed when she saw Oliver. She softened. "Hi," she said, her voice calm but layered. Oliver stepped slightly behind Daniel. "It's okay, bud," Daniel murmured, then looked up at her. "You sent the note." "I did." She walked forward. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," he said honestly. A long pause. "Thank you," she said, "for that night, for not asking questions, for handing me your phone like it was nothing." "I didn't think it was nothing," Daniel replied. "I just thought it wasn't my business." She smiled faintly. "That's rare." Claire crouched slightly to Oliver's level. "Do you like peanut butter cookies?" Oliver glanced at Daniel, who gave a small nod. Claire motioned toward a sitting room nearby. "Harlan baked some this morning." "Wait, he bakes?" Daniel asked. "Everyone has surprises," she replied. While Oliver explored the shelves of books and toys clearly arranged with care for a guest, Daniel sat across from Claire in the smaller lounge. It was cozy quieter, filled with lived-in energy. Not just a mansion, but a home someone had once fought to make real. She spoke slowly, deliberately never playing the victim, but Daniel could read between the lines. Claire had been preparing to sever ties with the Ellington legacy, not out of spite but out of survival. Her parents were gone, the boardroom was filled with vultures, and her fiancé had become a stranger who saw her more as a title than a person. She had tried to disappear, but plans unraveled. The night Daniel met her, she'd escaped a staged confrontation, a stunt meant to scare her into submission. "I didn't know where to go," she admitted. "I just walked. And then you stopped." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You should have gone to the police. I couldn't risk headlines. Not yet. Not until I had control again." And now Claire looked over at Oliver, who was giggling as Harlan pretended not to understand a knock-knock joke. "I have leverage, and thanks to you, I had time to use it." She turned back to Daniel. "I don't want to pay you," she said plainly. "I know that's not why you helped me. But I wanted you to see this." She motioned to the space around them and understand that sometimes people in places like this need kindness more than we admit. Daniel exhaled. "You didn't owe me anything." "No. But I'm glad you came anyway." As they stood to leave, Claire walked them to the door. The sun was beginning to set over the lake, casting gold across the floor. "Will you stay for dinner?" she asked suddenly. Daniel hesitated. Claire smiled, not pressing. "No pressure. Just maybe let Oliver decide." Daniel turned to his son. Oliver beamed. That evening, as they sat down to a meal of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes served on porcelain plates that felt far too elegant for comfort, something unspoken passed between Daniel and Claire. Not romance. Not yet. But something else. The beginning of trust. The kind that only grows in silence and survival in spaces where strangers don't ask questions but offer umbrellas instead. And Daniel, for the first time in months, didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt seen. The dinner stretched longer than Daniel had anticipated, not because of the food, though it was excellent, or the grand dining room which made him feel like he'd stepped onto the set of some forgotten PBS drama. It was the ease of it all. The strange, gentle rhythm of laughter, Oliver's especially bouncing off high ceilings and polished wood. The quiet smiles Claire gave across the table. The way her eyes softened each time Oliver tried to cut his roasted carrots without chasing them across the plate. It was peaceful, but layered. Daniel could sense it. Beneath the stillness, Claire held a tension in her shoulders like someone used to scanning for unseen threats. She masked it well, but he'd seen it before in war buddies who came home, but never quite landed. In himself, the night he got the call about his wife's accident and didn't speak for hours afterward. Dinner ended, but neither he nor Oliver made any move to rush out, and Claire curiously didn't want them to. They settled into the family room, a far cry from the pristine showroom feel of the formal living space. Here there were board games, half-shelved, a puzzle in progress on the coffee table books with corners turned down, and a throw blanket lazily abandoned on the couch's arm. Lived in, human, the only room that didn't apologize for being a home. Claire poured hot cocoa from a small silver pot, surprising both Daniel and Oliver. "You made this?" Daniel asked, inspecting the real, melted chocolate swirled through the steam. "Used to be my favorite thing as a kid. We had a housekeeper who called it liquid courage." She smiled faintly. "I guess I needed some." Oliver sipped and grinned. "This is better than Starbucks." Claire chuckled. High praise. As Oliver curled up with Toby and a well-worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit from Claire's bookshelf, Daniel turned toward her, their seats angled just enough to allow space, but not distance. "So, what now?" he asked quietly. Claire looked at her hands for a long moment. "Now I figure out how to close the door on one chapter without burning the entire house down." Daniel watched her. She wasn't speaking in metaphors. Or maybe she was, but they were too close to reality to be dismissed. "I meant it when I said I didn't want to pay you," she said. "But I didn't bring you here just to say thank you." "Then why?" "Because you didn't ask who I was. That night you didn't ask what I'd done or why I was there. You handed me your phone like I was just human. Not a headline, not a dollar sign." Daniel leaned back slightly. "You looked like you needed someone to do exactly that." Claire hesitated. "My ex-fiancé didn't like hearing no. He made a habit of pushing until yes was the only safe answer. The night I left, he found out I was planning to sell my shares, cut myself loose from the company entirely. He didn't want the money to disappear, or the power, so he staged something, called it a security intervention, told my team I was having a breakdown." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "I ran. I walked until my shoes blistered. I hadn't eaten. My phone died. But I knew one number by heart, my lawyer. And when you handed me your phone..." She swallowed. "I finally made the call." "You didn't say anything," Daniel said gently. Claire looked at him. "I couldn't. Just hearing his voice. I knew he'd trace the call. I just needed him to know I was alive." Daniel nodded slowly. "He knows you're safe now." "Yes. And this place is off the radar. My legal team has pulled every string to keep me quiet until I make the next move." Daniel's voice was quiet. "So, you're still in hiding." Claire laughed, but it wasn't joyful. "Let's call it strategic silence." They sat there a moment longer before Claire turned to him with something more vulnerable in her expression. "I didn't just want to thank you. I wanted to know if you and Oliver might stay for a few days." Daniel blinked. "Excuse me? Not forever. Just a few nights. I've had security around for weeks. Lawyers, advisors, no real people, no one who says what they mean. And Oliver, he reminds me of someone I used to be before all this." He hesitated. "Claire, I'm a single dad. I don't take charity. I'm not offering charity. I'm asking for presents." He looked toward Oliver, now half asleep with Toby under one arm. "I'd cover groceries," she added quickly, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Daniel laughed softly. "Well, in that case..." But underneath the teasing, something stirred in him. A door he hadn't opened in a long time. He had spent so long in survival mode he'd forgotten what calm could feel like, or what it meant to offer it to someone else. That night, Claire prepared a guest room for Oliver, soft lighting blankets folded just so even a small stuffed fox sat on the pillow. Daniel stood at the door for a moment, watching her with quiet wonder. She wasn't playing hostess. She was healing herself one gentle act at a time. As they closed the lights and stepped into the hallway, Claire said, "Thank you for saying yes." Daniel replied, "Thank you for trusting me." Later, alone in the room prepared for him, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked softly like it was learning to breathe again after being too quiet for too long. He thought about his late wife, how much she would have liked Claire. How proud she'd be of Oliver finding comfort in a place neither of them belonged to, but were somehow welcome in. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, he didn't dream of loss. He dreamed of something quietly blooming. Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen, bathed in morning light. A linen shirt hung loosely over her frame sleeves, rolled up her hair still damp from the shower. The coffee pot hissed behind her as she poured 2 mugs, one black one with cream, remembering how Daniel had taken his the night before. When he entered, bleary-eyed and still adjusting to the brightness of a house that didn't believe in dim corners, Claire looked up and smiled. "I guessed on the cream," she said, handing him the mug. He accepted it with a quiet nod. "You remembered. I remember a lot more than I'd like to admit." Daniel took a sip and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You don't seem like someone who forgets much." Claire turned toward the window. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Oliver wandered in shortly after, dragging Toby by one arm. He clambered onto one of the tall stools at the island and blinked at the plate in front of him, toast shaped like stars, scrambled eggs with cheese swirled in. "Whoa," he breathed. Claire grinned. "I Googled, breakfast for picky kids." "I hope it worked." Oliver looked to Daniel wide-eyed. "Can we live here?" Daniel chuckled. "We're just visiting Bud." Claire's smile faltered slightly. Just for a second. Then she masked it, turning back to the stove. After breakfast, Claire offered to show them around the property. Not the manicured part, the path behind the house that led down to the lake. A worn dirt trail that hadn't seen shoes in a while. Daniel walked beside her while Oliver ran ahead, chasing dragonflies, his laughter ringing across the water like music too long unsung. "This place? It looks like it should be perfect," Daniel said, "but it doesn't feel like it's been lived in." Claire nodded slowly. "Because it hasn't." "Not really. After my parents died, I kept the house, but I never made it home." Daniel glanced at her. "Why not?" She looked up at the trees above them. "Because making something a home means you can lose it. Again. And I got tired of losing things." They stopped near the edge of the dock. Claire removed her sandals and stepped onto the weathered planks, feeling the wood warm under her soles. The lake rippled gently, reflecting the sun like broken glass. "I didn't just lose people, Daniel. I lost myself." He stayed quiet, the way he always did when someone said something too raw for a response. She turned slightly to face him. "My fiancé, Richard, he didn't hit me. He didn't scream or threaten. He did something worse. He made me doubt my own instincts. He made me believe I was unstable, that I was paranoid, that I needed him to manage everything because I was too emotional." Her voice remained steady. "That's why I didn't say anything that night. I'd spent so long being silenced that even when I was free, my words hadn't caught up yet." Daniel's hand tightened around the railing. "You didn't deserve that." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No one does. But it happens. Quietly, elegantly. Especially to women like me, born into the illusion of control, raised to maintain an image. If I had screamed, no one would have heard me over the applause of being engaged to the heir of 3 tech empires." He looked at her not as a billionaire, not as a symbol, but as a survivor. "Do you still feel like you're his prisoner?" "No. But I feel like I'm still trying to remember who I was before him." Daniel let the silence settle. Then, slowly, he said, "I know a little something about forgetting who you are." She turned to him. "When my wife died, I thought I had to become someone else to keep going. Strong, silent, unshakable. But all it did was make me invisible to my own son. I thought I was protecting him by not letting him see me fall apart. Turns out he needed to see me be human more than he needed me to be a wall." Claire's eyes shimmered, not with tears but recognition. Later that day, Oliver sat on the patio with a coloring book, legs tucked under him, completely absorbed. Daniel and Claire watched from inside a soft acoustic playlist filling the background. "He's doing better," she said. Daniel nodded. "He is." "I like who he is around you," Claire added almost as a whisper. "He trusts you." "It shows." Daniel smiled faintly. He didn't for a long time. After his mom passed, he shut down. Wouldn't talk to teachers. Cried at night for someone he couldn't name. Sometimes I think he missed the version of me that laughed more than he missed her. Claire reached for her glass of water, thoughtful. "Grief doesn't steal just the people we love. It steals the version of ourselves we were with them." Daniel looked at her genuinely stunned. She glanced up. "Sorry, that was a bit much." "No," he said softly. "That was exactly right." That evening, Daniel found himself helping Claire prep dinner. Not fancy, just spaghetti garlic bread and a Caesar salad, but the act itself felt intimate. She tossed lettuce while he grated cheese. Their arms brushed once or twice each time, sending a small ripple of warmth between them. "Do you cook often?" Daniel asked. "Not for a long time," Claire admitted, "but tonight, it felt good to do something normal. Normal's underrated." He smiled. They ate together again, this time with less formality. Oliver told silly stories. Claire laughed freely, and Daniel watched them both, something stirring deep within him, an emotion that felt dangerously close to hope. After putting Oliver to bed, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony with a cup of tea Claire had made. The lake shimmered beneath the moonlight, calm and vast. He leaned on the railing, letting the quiet wash over him. Claire joined him moments later, arms crossed against the chill. "I haven't had this much silence in years," she said. "Too much." She shook her head. "No. It's the kind that lets you hear your own voice again." They stood together, looking out, neither speaking. And in that space between words, between stories half told and wounds half healed, something unspoken settled between them. The realization that maybe they weren't here to save each other. Maybe they were here to remind each other that healing was possible, and that some walls weren't meant to keep people out. Some were just waiting for someone to knock. It was still early when Daniel stepped onto the back porch, a mug of coffee in hand, the chill of Oregon's spring morning brushing gently against his face. The lake shimmered with mist. In the distance, birdsong laced through the trees like a half-forgotten lullaby. He heard soft giggling. Rounding the corner, he found Claire kneeling on the lawn, carefully wrapping something bright red around Oliver's neck. The boy's cheeks were flushed with laughter, his eyes wide with joy. Claire adjusted the scarf one last time, then leaned back smiling with a kind of tenderness that wasn't performative. It was real, instinctive. Daniel leaned against the railing, watching silently, not wanting to break the spell. "You made that?" he finally asked, stepping down onto the grass. Claire turned, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I did. Used to knit in college. Picked it up again last winter during a rough patch. This one was meant to be donated, but—" She glanced at Oliver. It hadn't found the right home until now. Oliver beamed. "It's warm. And red's my favorite." Daniel reached out to gently tug one end of the scarf. "Looks good on you, champ." Oliver puffed out his chest, clearly pleased. "Hey, you said we could go down to the lake today," the boy said, bouncing slightly on his heels. "We did," Daniel replied. "How about after breakfast?" Claire knelt to Oliver's level. "Would you like me to pack a picnic?" Oliver's eyes lit up. "Yes." "With cookies," Claire laughed. "Especially cookies." Later that morning, the three of them trekked the same trail from the day before, this time carrying a woven basket Claire insisted was essential for any proper picnic. Oliver skipped ahead, his red scarf trailing like a flag of joy in the wind. Daniel walked beside Claire, their steps in sync without trying. "You're good with him," he said quietly. Claire shrugged. "He makes it easy." Not everyone would say that. Most people walk on eggshells around him. He has big emotions. They don't always fit into small spaces. Claire smiled gently. "I never liked small spaces." When they reached the lake's edge, Oliver kicked off his shoes and darted toward the water. Daniel and Claire spread a blanket on the grass. The lake glistened under the midday sun, and for a moment it felt like the world had exhaled, like it had chosen today to rest. Growing up, Claire began. "I used to come here with my mom. Before everything got complicated. She'd let me build rock towers and name the ducks. We'd sit just like this." Daniel glanced at her. "You don't talk about your parents much." She traced a finger over the rim of her cup. "It's easier to pretend they were perfect. Safer. But the truth is they were good people caught in a very cold world. They didn't always know how to protect me from the shadows inside our walls. You've built something warmer, Daniel said, looking around. Even if you don't think so. Claire met his gaze, quiet appreciation in her eyes. You've built something, too. With Oliver, even when the world gave you no blueprint. Daniel's chest tightened at the compliment. It wasn't the kind of praise he heard often, honest, specific, and undeserved in his mind. I've made more mistakes than I care to count, he admitted. Most days I'm just guessing, trying to do right by him. Claire reached over and gently touched his hand. That's what parenting is. Guessing, trying, loving through it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence as Oliver gathered rocks, building a tiny castle at the edge of the lake. He's doing better, Daniel said after a while. Before this, he wouldn't go near water. Said it reminded him of the car ride the night we lost his mom. Said it felt like drowning even on land. Claire turned to look at the boy, her expression soft. And now he's laughing, wearing a red scarf like a superhero cape. I don't know what you did, but Daniel's voice caught. He hasn't smiled like that in months. Claire blinked back tears. I didn't do anything. I just saw him. And I think, maybe, that's what he needed. Daniel nodded, his voice quiet. Me too. That evening they returned home, sun-warmed and wind-tousled. Claire laid out the leftover picnic items on the kitchen island while Oliver sprawled on the couch, scarf still wrapped proudly around his neck, utterly content. Daniel stepped beside her, stealing a piece of cheese from the tray. You ever think about what comes next? Claire turned to him, surprised. What do you mean? This, he gestured loosely around them. It's temporary. You said so yourself. Eventually, the world knocks again. Claire looked down. I know. Daniel's tone was gentle but firm. So, what's your plan when it does? She took a deep breath. There's a board meeting coming. I'll push to remove myself from the Ellington group officially. Take back my name, but not the empire. And then, I don't know. That takes courage, he said. She smiled. Not as much as raising a son on night shifts and cold dinners. They both laughed softly, a kind of mutual respect silently forming. Claire turned serious again. I don't know where I'll end up, Daniel, but I know I want to live differently now, not behind gates or headlines, just real. Daniel nodded. Then start here, one moment at a time. Before bedtime, Claire pulled a book from the shelf and sat beside Oliver. He curled up next to her without hesitation. Will you read? He asked. She looked at Daniel, who gave a small nod. Claire opened the book, her voice calm and steady as she read Goodnight Moon, the same way Daniel's wife used to read it, only softer, almost reverent. When she finished, Oliver whispered, I like your voice. It sounds like falling asleep feels. Claire blinked, swallowing emotion. Thank you, sweetheart. She tucked the red scarf around him like a blanket. That night, as Daniel lay awake again, he realized something had shifted. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in a quiet, irrevocable one. This wasn't just about healing, it was about beginning. And somewhere in the warmth of a borrowed scarf, a lakeside picnic, and a bedtime story, he had crossed a threshold. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He was slowly, gently coming home. The morning began like the others, slow, golden, and filled with the kind of small domestic joys Daniel hadn't allowed himself to enjoy in years. Claire was in the garden, trimming lavender. Oliver was at the breakfast nook, sketching something he refused to show just yet. Daniel was frying eggs while humming a tune he barely remembered. It was ordinary, which made what happened next all the more jarring. The doorbell rang. Not the polite chime of someone expected, but the sharp, insistent kind that pierced through calm like a warning bell. Daniel wiped his hands and walked to the front door. Through the glass, he saw a man in a button-down shirt and jeans holding a tablet. A reporter. Daniel's gut twisted. He opened the door slowly. Mr. Brooks, the man asked. Daniel Brooks. Daniel didn't answer. I'm with the Chronicle. Just a few questions about your stay here with Miss Ellington. Word is you've been living here with your son. Would you care to comment on the nature of your relationship?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "No." The reporter smiled, shameless. "There's quite a story unfolding. A single father down on his luck caught in the warm embrace of a billionaire heiress. You have to admit it's a headline made for clicks." Daniel stepped forward. "You need to leave." Just then, Claire appeared on the porch behind him. She wore gardening gloves, dirt on her sleeves, hair in a braid. She looked nothing like the woman on magazine covers, and everything like a person trying to start over. Her eyes locked onto the reporter. "You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you." The reporter raised both hands in mock surrender. "Of course, but the story's already live." He turned and walked off with a swagger Daniel wanted to wipe off his face. Claire stepped past Daniel and shut the door gently. Then for a long moment no one spoke. They gathered in the den, the three of them, Oliver sensing the tension but saying nothing, gripping Toby like the little bear could protect him from whatever was coming. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, tablet in hand, scrolling. Her face was still. Too still. Daniel finally asked, "What does it say?" She turned the screen so he could see. From security guard to fairy tale. The man who captured Claire Ellington's heart. An inside look at the mysterious single dad who may have swept America's quietest heiress off her feet. Photos followed, grainy ones of Daniel and Oliver walking with Claire by the lake, a shot of Claire placing the red scarf around Oliver's neck, a long-lens image of Daniel shirtless carrying a stack of firewood. It felt like a violation, a theft of intimacy. Moments that were theirs alone now served on a silver tray for public consumption. Daniel's voice was low. "Who leaked this?" Claire's lips thinned. "I have a guess." Daniel didn't need her to say it. Richard, her ex-fiancé, had the motive, the means, and clearly the ruthlessness. If he couldn't control Claire, he would taint her narrative, cheapen her recovery, and use Daniel as leverage, another example of her reckless choices. Daniel stood. "We should leave." Claire's head shot up. "What? This is your life, your war, and I won't let Oliver get caught in the crossfire. You're not." "I am Daniel," cut in voice firm but not unkind. "You gave us peace, but now the world knows, and I won't let it turn Oliver into a headline." Claire stood too, the space between them filled with unfinished words. "I didn't bring you here to trap you," she said. "I know. I brought you here because you were the first good thing in a long time, because you reminded me that I was more than my name." Daniel swallowed hard. "And that's exactly why I need to leave. So you can fight this without worrying about me or my son being used as a weapon." Claire blinked, and in that moment Daniel saw the fear she rarely let surface. "You'll hate me for this," he said softly. She shook her head. "I could never hate you." Packing didn't take long. They hadn't brought much. Oliver didn't ask questions. He moved quietly, folding Toby into the duffel bag like he understood this wasn't a goodbye you could argue with, it was one you had to accept. Claire stood by the door, arms folded, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Daniel took her hand and pressed something into it. It was a note folded twice. "Read it later," he said. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. Then he knelt before Oliver. "Say thank you, buddy." Oliver ran to Claire and wrapped his arms around her. "Thank you for everything, and for the scarf." She knelt too, holding him fiercely. "Keep it. It's yours." "I will," Oliver whispered. "I'll take care of it. Like you took care of me." Claire's voice cracked. "You're a brave boy." He nodded, eyes bright. Daniel took his son's hand, opened the door, and walked out into the gray afternoon. That night, Claire unfolded the note Daniel had left. "Claire, thank you for letting us breathe again, for laughter around the table, for quiet that didn't feel lonely, for letting Oliver be seen, for letting me be too. You don't owe me a fairy tale. You never did. But if someday the world quiets down and you find yourself still looking out at the lake wondering if kindness was ever enough, remember this. You already saved someone, even if no one else prints that headline. Daniel. She pressed the note to her chest, eyes closed, and for the first time in years she cried. Not from fear, but from the ache of something beautiful being just out of reach, and the faint flickering hope that maybe it wasn't over. Not yet. Rain returned to the city as if to echo the quiet unraveling of something once whole. Daniel drove back to his small rented home on the edge of town with Oliver silent in the back seat, the red scarf still snug around his neck. The boy hadn't spoken since they'd left Claire's estate. His eyes stared out the window, tracking raindrops like they were stories falling apart. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel was tight knuckles pale. He didn't feel angry, not exactly, more like hollowed. Like he'd torn away from something not because it was broken, but because it was too good to survive the noise of the world. Their house greeted them with the familiar smell of old carpet and lemon cleaner. Daniel dropped the duffel bag inside the door, rubbed the back of his neck, and looked around. He had left it clean, not expecting it to feel so lifeless. "Hey, bud," he said, gently turning to Oliver. "Want to help me order some pizza? Maybe with pineapple?" Oliver didn't answer. He walked to the couch, crawled up with Toby, and curled into a ball. Daniel exhaled slowly, walked over and sat beside him. "You okay?" A small nod. Daniel paused. "I know it's hard, leaving a place that felt good, but it was the right thing. We had to protect ourselves." Oliver turned his head, voice muffled. "Was she in danger?" Daniel blinked. "What?" Claire Oliver said softly. "Was she in danger because of us?" Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. She was already in the middle of something difficult. "We just became part of the story." Oliver hugged his stuffed animal tighter. "I liked her stories better." Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't have an answer for that. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt like imitation, like they were pretending to be who they had been before Claire entered their lives. Daniel returned to work. The night shifts felt longer, lonelier. The mall's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while the CCTV screens flickered quietly like ghosts. He found himself checking news feeds more often than he wanted to admit, searching for Claire's name, half hoping she'd disappear from the headlines, half hoping she wouldn't. Then, one night during his break, he stepped outside for air and found a man waiting by the loading dock. Not just any man. Richard Monroe. Even without the $1,000 trench coat or the smug expression, Daniel knew who he was. The man radiated curated power, the kind that was as rehearsed as it was dangerous. "You must be Daniel Brooks," Richard said, stepping forward. His voice was smooth, polished, coated in contempt. The moral knight of the hour. Daniel didn't flinch. "What do you want?" Richard smiled like a politician. "Let's not pretend this is a fairy tale. You played your part." Claire had her moment of rebellion, but the moments passed. Daniel crossed his arms. "Is that what you think she is? A moment she's confused, and easily swayed by sob stories and underdogs. She always had a soft spot for the broken ones." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She's not yours to categorize." Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping an octave. "She's mine to protect from herself if necessary. You walked away once. Do us both a favor and stay gone." Daniel didn't blink. "Is that a threat?" Richard chuckled. "No, it's a warning, one I expect you're smart enough to take." He turned on his heel coat, flaring, and disappeared into the night like a villain from a noir film. But Daniel didn't chase him. He just stood there, the cool air bracing against the fire in his chest. That weekend, Daniel took Oliver to a small community fair. It had always been their tradition, something he and his late wife had started when Oliver was just a toddler. Rides, lemonade, a magician who wasn't very good but always remembered Oliver's name. They sat on a bench eating cotton candy when Oliver looked up. "Dad, do you think she misses us?" Daniel looked down at his son's face, so open, so trusting. "I think she remembers us," he said slowly, "and sometimes remembering hurts more than forgetting." Oliver nodded, thoughtful. Then he pulled the red scarf from his backpack and wrapped it around his neck. It was fraying a little at the edges now, but he wore it like armor. "I'm going to write her a letter," he said. Daniel blinked. "A letter?" Oliver nodded again, more determined this time. "To say thank you, for making me laugh again." Daniel swallowed. "That's a good idea." That night, while Oliver slept, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the letter beside him. Written in crayon, half misspelled, it was simple, pure. A child's offering of love without conditions. He stared at it for a long time before picking up a pen, and wrote one of his own. Not to beg, not to rekindle, just to say what hadn't been said. "Dear Claire, it's been quiet. Oliver misses you more than he says. I think I do too. The house feels smaller now, not just because it's old and cracked, but because it got used to being filled with something lighter. You once said you forgot who you were. I think we all do at some point. But I don't think you're lost. I think you're becoming. Whatever storm you're walking through, I hope you know this. You changed 2 lives with nothing but a picnic, a scarf, and a soft voice that told a hurting boy he mattered. No headlines can undo that. Stay brave. Daniel." He sealed the 2 letters together. And though he didn't know if they'd ever reach her, he mailed them the next morning anyway. Because sometimes the truest acts of love are the ones you don't expect a reply to. They're just the ones you need to send. Claire stood at the edge of the boardroom, her back straight, fingers clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone white. Her navy suit was pristine makeup, subtle, but her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. Outside the towering windows of Ellington Global's headquarters, the skyline of Portland gleamed under an indifferent sun. Inside, it was colder, sterile walls, sharper words. 12 board members sat before her in silence. Some wore polite neutrality, others thinly veiled skepticism. And at the head of the table, Richard Monroe sat with his legs crossed and confidence coiled tight like a fist beneath his charming smirk. Claire inhaled, slow, steady, then spoke. "I'm resigning as acting board chair." The room didn't gasp. They didn't need to. The tension, immediate and electric, was enough. "I filed legal documents transferring my voting rights into a philanthropic trust," she continued. "Effective immediately, I will hold no decision-making power in the company's operations or investments." One of the older board members, a woman named Teresa Vale, who had known Claire since she wore braces and carried a lunchbox with her initials on it, leaned forward. "Claire." "Are you sure?" Claire's jaw clenched. "More sure than I've ever been." Richard chuckled just loud enough to claim the moment. And what prompted this sudden epiphany, a week spent playing house in the countryside with your bodyguard of the month, Claire turned to him. No rage, no performance, just steel. "What prompted this was 10 years of watching my name build something I no longer believe in. You and I both know Ellington Global stopped standing for legacy the moment it started answering to investors instead of people. I want out." Richard stood. "You walk away now, Claire, and you won't be able to come back. No more family cushion, no more emergency votes, no safety net." "I don't want one," she said. "I'm not falling. I'm choosing to climb something real." A pause followed. No one moved, no one challenged, because deep down they knew she wasn't bluffing. She was burning the bridge behind her and doing it with grace. When the meeting adjourned, Richard followed her to the elevator. "You think this makes you noble," he hissed. "Walking away from billions from your family name?" "I'm not walking away from my name," Claire said, stepping inside. "I'm taking it back." The doors closed, and for the first time in her adult life, Claire Ellington rode the elevator down without feeling like she was descending into something false. She was finally rising. That evening, back at her estate, Claire sat by the fireplace in soft jeans and an old hoodie. No cameras, no meetings, no guards. Just quiet. Just firelight. In her lap were 2 envelopes. One with Oliver's handwriting, large letters backward as a crayon drawing of him and Daniel standing beneath a tree. Toby the turtle floated beside them in the air like a happy balloon. The second envelope was heavier, neater. Daniel's words unfolded like a whisper across the pages. His writing wasn't flowery, but it was honest. Each sentence weighted with something Claire hadn't allowed herself to hope for. He didn't ask her to return. He simply reminded her that she was already seen, already valued, already loved in ways she hadn't dared name aloud. Her tears came slowly, not from sadness, from clarity, from knowing what she had to do next. 2 days later, Daniel arrived home from a double shift. His shoulders sagged, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He pushed open the door, expecting silence. Instead, the scent of cinnamon filled the house. He blinked. Oliver ran to the door, wide-eyed. "Dad." "She's here." Daniel froze. And then Claire stepped out of the kitchen apron over a sweater flower on her cheek and a look in her eyes that undid something inside him. "I hope you're not too tired," she said, voice soft but steady. "I've been practicing cinnamon rolls. The edges are still too crunchy." Daniel stared. "You're here." "I am," she nodded. "And I brought a peace offering." "You didn't need to." "I did," she interrupted gently. "Because I left things unsaid, and because I needed to fight for something this time, not just walk away from it." Daniel looked at her, heart pounding. "What about your company I resigned?" His eyes widened. "You what? I stepped away. Built a foundation instead, one that won't answer to profits but to people." She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed brochure. Red Scarf Foundation. Underneath the tagline read, "Kindness can start anywhere, even in the rain." Daniel took the paper, overwhelmed. "It's a community initiative," Claire explained, focused on supporting single-parent families, trauma-affected kids, and those healing from emotional abuse. There'll be counseling, food, assistance, educational grants. I used my name one last time to build something better. Daniel's throat tightened. "You built this because of Oliver." She smiled. "Because of Oliver, because of you, because of a phone call I never made." That night, the 3 of them ate cinnamon rolls at the kitchen table, some edges too dark, some centers still gooey, but no one complained. After Oliver fell asleep, Daniel walked Claire to the door. She turned unsure. "Do I go?" He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "No. You stay. If you want." She stepped closer. "I want to." He nodded once. "Then you're home." And just like that, no grand kiss, no sweeping music, just a quiet promise they stepped into something not perfect but true. Something not fairy tale but real. And it was more than enough. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Daniel's living room, casting soft golden rays on the worn hardwood floors. The small house had never felt so full, not crowded, but full in the best possible way. With laughter, with warmth, with her. Claire was in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring orange juice into mismatched glasses. Daniel was sitting at the table, helping Oliver spell out a new word foundation, while Toby the turtle leaned sideways against a blue crayon. "You almost had it." Daniel smiled gently, correcting the backward N. "Try again." Oliver grinned and set to work, tongue poking out in concentration. Claire watched from across the counter, arms crossed loosely over her chest, her eyes tender. This was the part she hadn't known she'd missed. Not the penthouses or the boardroom wins, but mornings like this, the smell of toast, the sound of pencils scribbling, the calm, constant hum of people just being together. When Oliver finished the word, he turned the page in his notebook and began writing again, this time unprompted. Daniel glanced at him. "What are you working on now, but a letter?" Oliver said brightly. "To Claire. But for real this time." Claire blinked. "Oh." He nodded, focused. "I want to give it to her when the new center opens." Claire moved to sit beside him, curious. "Can I peek?" He hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. She smiled. Okay, surprise me. Later that day, they visited the site of what would soon become the Red Scarf Foundation. It was still raw, just a building shell construction tape and metal scaffolding, but Claire saw it with the clarity only someone with vision could have. This place used to be a closed school, she explained as they stepped through the wide entry doors. City couldn't get the funding to fix it. I bought it last week. The gym will become a multi-purpose community hall. Classrooms converted into therapy spaces, tutoring rooms. There'll be a playground out back. Oliver ran ahead, exploring the empty corridors. His voice echoed down the hallway as he called for Daniel to come see the super cool big room. Claire turned to Daniel. I want this to be more than a building. I want it to be what we didn't have growing up. A place that tells people they matter before the world tries to convince them they don't. Daniel watched her for a long moment. You're doing something incredible here. Claire looked away, her voice quieter. It started with you. With him. I just followed it. Daniel didn't respond with words. He simply reached out and took her hand. And for a second, all the weight she still carried felt lighter. Over the next week, as construction began and Claire held planning meetings, Daniel and Oliver returned to a familiar rhythm, but one that now pulsed with renewed purpose. Oliver insisted on drawing posters for the center's grand opening. One for every window, he declared, and one for the front that says, "This place is safe." Daniel caught Claire tearing up when she read that last one. At night after dinner, Claire would read aloud sometimes from children's books, sometimes from news articles about community work across the country. Oliver would fall asleep to the sound of her voice, safe in a world that once scared him. And then, one evening, as the sky turned lavender and the first stars blinked into existence, Oliver stepped into the living room with a folded sheet of paper in his hand. He looked nervous. Claire. She turned from where she was sipping tea on the couch. Yes, sweetheart. He held out the note. I finished your letter. For real. Claire took it with both hands, treating it like something sacred. She opened it. Dear Claire, thank you for the scarf. I wear it when I feel brave. Thank you for Coco and letting me read the funny books first. Thank you for the picnic. I liked the strawberries. Thank you for helping Dad smile more. I like when he smiles. When I first met you, I didn't know if you were magic or sad. Maybe both. But now I know you are kind and strong. You make things better, even grown-ups. I hope our new building helps kids who are scared to talk like I was. I hope it helps dads like mine who try hard every day. You are my friend forever. Love, Oliver and Toby. Claire couldn't speak for a long moment. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. She looked up at Daniel, who was already watching her soft, proud quiet. Tears shimmered in her eyes, and she smiled at Oliver. May I keep this? Oliver beamed. Forever. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly. Thank you, she whispered. I'm glad you're staying, he whispered back. And something in Claire's heart, something long-walled and quiet, finally clicked into place. She wasn't passing through anymore. She was home. That night, as Oliver slept, Daniel stepped outside and found Claire sitting on the porch letter still in hand. You okay? He asked. She nodded. More than okay. They sat together in silence for a while, watching fireflies flicker near the grass. I used to think I had to build towers to prove I mattered, she said softly. But it turns out, all I ever needed was a little boy with a crayon to tell me I was already enough. Daniel didn't say anything. He just reached for her hand again, and she let him hold it. Not because she needed rescue, but because she had finally stopped running, and because love, when it arrives wrapped in red scarves and scribbled words, doesn't demand a spotlight. It just asks to be chosen day after day, moment by moment. And tonight, under the soft Oregon stars, she chose. The sun rose warm and golden over the newly renovated building that once stood forgotten at the edge of town. Now it shimmered with a fresh coat of white paint and hope. A simple sign stood tall over the entrance, freshly installed just that morning. Red Scarf Foundation. Kindness can start anywhere, even in the rain. Claire stood beneath it, her hands folded gently in front of her, dressed not in designer suits or polished armor, but in a soft blue blouse and dark jeans. Her hair was swept into a low bun, her face natural radiant in its honesty. Beside her stood Daniel Ty, crooked nerves barely hidden. He hadn't worn a suit since his wedding day. He kept fidgeting with his cuffs until Claire reached over and stilled his hands with one light touch. "You look good," she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. "You mean like intimidating millionaire boyfriend good, or don't trip over your shoes in front of city council good?" Claire laughed, genuine and warm. "Both." A few feet away, Oliver clutched a clipboard and walked around with serious purpose, helping volunteers tape posters to walls, guiding kids toward the art stations, and occasionally whispering to Toby, now worn from love, but still hanging by a thread. The center's courtyard had been transformed for the grand opening. Folding chairs faced a makeshift stage where a simple wooden podium stood adorned with a garland of red ribbons. Local families gathered curious. Reporters mingled. Former colleagues of Claire's who had once looked at her with expectation now looked on with something else entirely respect. And then Claire stepped up to the microphone. A hush fell over the crowd, not because of her fame, but because of the unmistakable presence she now carried. Not larger than life, but deeply, unmistakably human. "Thank you for being here." She began, her voice steady but soft. "A year ago, I stood in front of a different kind of audience, in a different kind of building. I spoke about market projections and quarterly goals. I spoke from the head." She paused, looking out at the rows of families, her eyes finding Daniel's for an instant. "But today, I want to speak from the heart." A breeze passed through the courtyard, catching the red ribbons like sails. "I built this center not because I had a dream, but because I had an awakening. A stranger lent me a phone in the rain. A little boy wore a red scarf like it was a shield. And somewhere in between I remembered who I was meant to be." She motioned to the crowd. "This place is for those moments we think don't matter. The small kindnesses, the quiet help, the people who show up not with solutions but with presence." Claire's voice grew firmer. "This foundation will offer therapy, education, legal aid, and emotional support to single parents, children recovering from trauma, and anyone who's ever been told they're too broken, too poor, or too alone to deserve help." A pause. Then, "No one here is too small to matter, and no one is invisible anymore." Applause erupted, not wild or loud, but full, like a shared breath released. Claire stepped down, blinking away the tears she didn't let fall, and Daniel stepped up. He didn't carry a speech, no cards, just the letter Oliver had written in his pocket like a compass. He looked out over the crowd, cleared his throat once, and began. "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm not a speaker. I'm a dad. I'm a man who's messed up more than he's gotten right. But I'm learning." He looked toward Oliver, who gave him a double thumbs up. "I'm learning that the hardest thing about being a parent isn't the bills or the long nights. It's the moments when you're trying to be strong and your kid just wants you to be real. Claire taught me that, not with lessons, but with how she sees people, especially my son." He swallowed. "There was a time when I thought survival was all I could hope for. And then someone gave me a home I didn't ask for. A place at a table I didn't think I deserved. She didn't fix me. She reminded me I was never broken to begin with." His voice grew quiet. "Today, I'm proud to be part of something that starts with love and leads with kindness." The crowd stood to applaud not just for him, but for them, for what they represented. Not success, but redemption. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the volunteers began clearing chairs, Claire found Daniel near the stage, sipping lemonade like he'd just run a marathon. "You were amazing," she said, walking up beside him. He smiled sheepishly. "Didn't pass out. That's a win." She leaned in. "You passed something else, too." He blinked. "What?" She slid a small envelope into his hand. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple certificate Daniel Brooks' co-founder Red Scarf Foundation. He looked up, startled. Claire shrugged. It was never just my story. Daniel stared at the certificate. For a long time, words didn't come. Then, finally, "Are you sure I've never been more?" She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. And this time there were no cameras, no microphones, no reporters, just a man, a woman, and a child standing outside a building they had willed into existence with nothing but memory loss, love, and the belief that quiet kindness could become something loud enough to change lives. As the sun dipped behind the roofline of the new center, Oliver ran up and tugged on Claire's hand. "I want to show you my favorite part," he said. She grinned. "Lead the way." He pulled her around the side of the building where a mural had been painted, a little boy in a red scarf holding a phone in the rain, passing it to a woman with tears in her eyes. Below it, written in bold red letters. It started with a phone call that didn't need words. And underneath in a child's handwriting, "Thank you for answering." The first snow of the season fell lightly over Oregon, dusting the roof of the Red Scarf Foundation in a veil of white. Inside, warmth bloomed in every corner, twinkling lights along the windows, garlands strung between doorways, and the smell of cinnamon and pine wrapping around every person who stepped through the doors. It had been 6 months since the grand opening. 6 months since a single act of kindness became a movement, since strangers became something like family. Claire stood near the entrance watching families move through the community hall with easy familiarity, children playing in the reading corner, parents chatting over coffee volunteers, wrapping holiday gifts on long folding tables. She clutched a steaming mug in both hands, taking it all in, not as an outsider or benefactor, but as someone who belonged. Daniel approached from behind, gently resting a hand on her lower back. She leaned into it instinctively. "They just brought in the last batch of coats," he said, nodding toward the donation table. "We might actually run out of shelves." Claire smiled. "We'll just build more." He chuckled. "You say that like it's easy. With you and Oliver here, it is." She turned toward him, fully studying his face, still rugged from long work shifts, still unsure sometimes of how to wear happiness, but undeniably softer now. Freer. Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Another certificate." She laughed. "Not this time." He opened it carefully and pulled out a key. Silver. Simple. Familiar. His eyes lifted to hers. "Is this what I think it is?" "I talked to Oliver," she said. "He thinks we should all live under the same roof, where the cocoa tastes right and Toby gets his own pillow." Daniel blinked, caught between speechless and overflowing. Claire's voice turned tender. "I know we already built something together, but I want to build more with you. Every morning, every argument, every silly inside joke, I want the real stuff, not just the peaceful parts. I want the messy Tuesdays and the tired Fridays and the Saturdays when the only plan is pancakes." Daniel's chest rose and fell, and then he smiled, slow, deep, certain. "You're sure he asked?" "I'm sure she said. This isn't me rescuing you. This is me finally letting someone stand beside me, and knowing I don't have to be anything but myself to be loved." Daniel stepped closer, resting his forehead gently against hers. "Then, let's go home." They moved into a cozy, 2-story house a few blocks from the center. Nothing extravagant, but big enough for board games on the floor forts made of couch cushions and weekend breakfasts with flour everywhere. Oliver got his own room painted sky blue with stars on the ceiling and a reading nook by the window. And Claire. She got a life that didn't need hiding behind headlines. She wrote grants at the kitchen table, hosted workshops in the evenings, and kissed Daniel goodbye every morning like the world wasn't perfect, but theirs was good enough to fight for. On the day after Christmas, Claire sat with Oliver on the back steps, their boots crunching in the soft snow, both wrapped in scarves. His was still red, now patched and mended where it had frayed. He handed her a piece of paper. Claire unfolded it, recognizing the handwriting instantly. My New Year list. 1. Help Dad make pancakes without burning them. 2. Learn how to tie my own tie. 3. Give Toby a middle name. 4. Help someone the way you helped me. 5. Never forget how this all started. P.S. I think we should write a book. You already know how it ends. Claire blinked back tears. Oliver nudged her. So, do you like it? She smiled and pulled him into a hug. More than you'll ever know. Later that evening, they hosted a small dinner with neighbors' staff and a few new families the foundation had recently welcomed. The dining table stretched end to end through the living room filled with mismatched chairs, chipped dishes, and more warmth than a mansion ever could have held. Daniel raised a glass of cider near the end of the meal, voice soft but sure. I don't know how many of you know the story of how all this began, he said, glancing at Claire, then at Oliver, who beamed behind a spoonful of mashed potatoes. But it started with something small. Just a moment, a stranger, a phone. No grand gesture, no promise of reward, just kindness. He paused. I used to think that didn't matter. That small kindness couldn't change anything. But I was wrong. He lifted his glass higher, to the moments that change everything. The room echoed with a chorus of Clink's nods and smiles. And in the corner of the room, pinned quietly to the wall near the entryway, hung the very first letter Oliver had written to Claire, framed with a small brass plaque underneath. It read, "Thank you for answering." Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, a single candle flickered on the windowsill. And within that small house and that growing community, kindness lived. Not in grand announcements or fairy tale endings, but in laughter over dinner, in bedtime stories and morning pancakes, in quiet choices to stay to listen to love again. And for Daniel, Claire, and Oliver, that was everything. Not the end, but the beginning they never knew they were waiting for. Chapter 11. Where Kindness Lives. The first snow of the season fell lightly over Oregon, dusting the roof of the Red Scarf Foundation in a veil of white. Inside, warmth bloomed in every corner, twinkling lights along the windows, garlands strung between doorways, and the smell of cinnamon and pine wrapping around every person who stepped through the doors. It had been 6 months since the grand opening. 6 months since a single act of kindness became a movement. Since strangers became something like family. Claire stood near the entrance watching families move through the community hall with easy familiarity, children playing in the reading corner, parents chatting over coffee volunteers, wrapping holiday gifts on long folding tables. She clutched a steaming mug in both hands, taking it all in, not as an outsider or benefactor, but as someone who belonged. Daniel approached from behind, gently resting a hand on her lower back. She leaned into it instinctively. They just brought in the last batch of coats, he said, nodding toward the donation table. We might actually run out of shelves. Claire smiled. We'll just build more. He chuckled. You say that like it's easy. With you and Oliver here it is. She turned toward him, fully studying his face, still rugged from long work shifts, still unsure sometimes of how to wear happiness, but undeniably softer now. Freer. Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Another certificate. She laughed. Not this time. He opened it carefully and pulled out a key. Silver. Simple. Familiar. His eyes lifted to hers. Is this what I think it is? I talked to Oliver, she said. He thinks we should all live under the same roof, where the cocoa tastes right and Toby gets his own pillow. Daniel blinked, caught between speechless and overflowing. Claire's voice turned tender. I know we already built something together, but I want to build more with you. Every morning, every argument, every silly inside joke. I want the real stuff, not just the peaceful parts. I want the messy Tuesdays and the tired Fridays and the Saturdays when the only plan is pancakes. Daniel's chest rose and fell, and then he smiled, slow, deep, certain. You're sure? He asked. I'm sure, she said. This isn't me rescuing you. This is me finally letting someone stand beside me. and knowing I don't have to be anything but myself to be loved. Daniel stepped closer, resting his forehead gently against hers. Then let's go home. They moved into a cozy, 2-story house a few blocks from the center. Nothing extravagant, but big enough for board games on the floor forts made of couch cushions and weekend breakfasts with flour everywhere. Oliver got his own room, painted sky blue with stars on the ceiling and a reading nook by the window. And Claire. She got a life that didn't need hiding behind headlines. She wrote grants at the kitchen table, hosted workshops in the evenings, and kissed Daniel goodbye every morning like the world wasn't perfect, but theirs was good enough to fight for. On the day after Christmas, Claire sat with Oliver on the back steps, their boots crunching in the soft snow, both wrapped in scarves. His was still red, now patched and mended where it had frayed. He handed her a piece of paper. Claire unfolded it, recognizing the handwriting instantly. My New Year list: 1. Help Dad make pancakes without burning them. 2. Learn how to tie my own tie. 3. Give Toby a middle name. 4. Help someone the way you helped me. 5. Never forget how this all started. P.S. I think we should write a book. You already know how it ends. Claire blinked back tears. Oliver nudged her. So, do you like it? She smiled and pulled him into a hug. More than you'll ever know. Later that evening, they hosted a small dinner with neighbors' staff and a few new families the foundation had recently welcomed. The dining table stretched end to end through the living room, filled with mismatched chairs, chipped dishes, and more warmth than a mansion ever could have held. Daniel raised a glass of cider near the end of the meal, voice soft but sure. I don't know how many of you know the story of how all this began, he said, glancing at Claire, then at Oliver, who beamed behind a spoonful of mashed potatoes. But it started with something small. Just a moment. A stranger. A phone. No grand gesture, no promise of reward, just kindness. He paused. I used to think that didn't matter, that small kindness couldn't change anything. But I was wrong. He lifted his glass higher. To the moments that change everything. The room echoed with a chorus of Clink's nods and smiles. And in the corner of the room, pinned quietly to the wall near the entryway, hung the very first letter Oliver had written to Claire, framed with a small brass plaque underneath. It read, "Thank you for answering." Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, a single candle flickered on the windowsill. And within that small house and that growing community, kindness lived. Not in grand announcements or fairy tale endings, but in laughter over dinner, in bedtime stories and morning pancakes, in quiet choices to stay to listen to love again. And for Daniel, Claire, and Oliver, that was everything. Not the end, but the beginning they never knew they were waiting for. And that was the story of how a simple act of kindness on a rainy night changed 3 lives forever. But now I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of the story touched you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you believe in the quiet power of compassion, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. From my heart to yours, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the ripple of a small good thing.